The unknown contact. The night sky above Karachi orbital shimmered with millions of stars, each one a point of quiet fire burning in the void. Fleet Officer Mira Khan stood on the command deck of Outpost 9, her eyes locked on the tactical display that showed a single moving blip. It was faint, irregular, and moving faster than any known ship could. Every sensor reading said the same thing. No drive plume, no transponder, no known design, just a silent shape cutting through the dark. The technicians whispered that it moved like a ghost. The last time the Empire had seen something like this, entire colonies vanished without warning. Mira tightened her jaw and leaned closer to the screen. The object wasn't just fast. It moved in impossible arcs, slipping between sensor sweeps as if it knew where they were looking. She ordered a deeper scan and cross-referenced every known signature in the fleet database. Nothing matched. Then suddenly the comms officer gasped. The object had transmitted a human code, a distress signal so old it hadn't been used since the first expansion era, nearly 100 years ago. The deck fell silent. That code belonged to the first generation of human explorers who vanished during the war against the Vir Dominion. Mira felt her heartbeat quicken. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope lit up, followed instantly by dread. If the Vir detected this signal, they would come hunting. She knew the Dominion never ignored ancient human relics. They feared them, and when the Vir feared something, they destroyed it. In a small training wing aboard the orbital, a boy named Eris Hale woke up from a nightmare. His phase sense, a rare instinct that only a few humans possessed, was burning in his head. He could feel the void humming like a heartbeat, like something alive was calling to him. He stumbled out of bed and ran to the observation window. The stars looked different tonight, as if one of them had started moving. When he reached out with his mind, the rhythm became clear. It wasn't random. It was human. Moments later, Mira arrived at the Starborn dormitory. She had seen Eris's name on the alert log. His neural patterns had spiked exactly when the signal appeared. Coincidence didn't exist in their line of work. She found him staring at the stars, whispering that someone was calling for help. Mira knelt beside him and asked what he felt. He said it was like hearing a voice through water, faint but desperate, and it came from the same direction as the unknown object. Mira knew this couldn't be ignored. She called the Fleet Council, requesting permission to send an intercept task force. Bureaucracy delayed her request as always. Some said it was a sensor glitch. Others said it was a Vir trap. But Mira wasn't waiting for orders. Humanity had been on the defensive for too long. Every chance to learn something new, to reclaim what was lost, mattered. She ordered her crew to ready the corvette group Falcon Wing. Within an hour, 3 ships detached from the orbital dock, engines burning soft blue trails as they slipped into the dark. As the ships aligned toward the signal's coordinates, Eris sat strapped into the sensor chair, his young face pale but determined. His phase sense would serve as their living compass. Mira watched the readings climb and felt the familiar tension that came before a jump. She gave the order. Space folded around them and they leapt toward the unknown on the Dominion side of the border. An alert flashed through the Vir command net. The same anomaly had entered their surveillance range. The Vir fleet commander, a tall creature encased in silver armor, studied the ghostly trace on his holomap. No life signs, no energy trail. Yet the object moved as if it were alive. The Vir hated mysteries. They had crushed every strange thing humanity ever built. Yet this one still existed. The commander hissed an order. Scout wings were to intercept and destroy the source before the humans could reach it. Back on Mira's bridge, the stars uncoiled into view. The readings flared. The object was close now, moving in and out of normal space like a fish darting through water. Then the comms cracked alive with static. A voice came through, distant and weak, repeating one phrase over and over. Lance Corps aboard. Enemies inside. Help us. Mira froze. The words were unmistakably human. She turned to Eris. His eyes were wide, his hands trembling. He whispered that the voice came from a human mind half buried in the void. The ghost ship was real, and it was not empty. That was the moment the Empire went on full alert. The Dominion had seen the same signal, and their fleet was already burning toward the same coordinates. The race had begun, and whoever reached the ghost first would decide whether humanity's lost power was reborn or buried forever. First chase, first blood. The Falcon Wing cut through the dark like a blade of light. 3 ships running silent. every crew member tense and listening to the hum of their engines. The ghost signal ahead pulsed at irregular intervals, sometimes clear, sometimes fading into static. Mira Khan stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes never leaving the display. Eris Hale sat strapped into the sensor chair again, his small hands gripping the edges as if he could hold the ship steady through will alone. His phase sense was stronger now, pulling him forward, guiding the Corvette through gravity tides that made machines stutter. He could feel space itself trembling like waves under ice. The ghost ship was close, too close for comfort. But so were the Veer. Mira's voice was calm but sharp as she ordered the helmsman to stay on Vector Delta 9. The computer showed faint signatures on their rear flank, and the rhythm of the ripples confirmed what she already feared. The Veer were here. Their ships were faster, built for slaughter, but they were arrogant. They relied on numbers and brute strength. Humans had something they did not: instinct, improvisation, phase sense. Mira knew that if she trusted her people and the boy, they could survive. Eris whispered that the ghost ship was skipping between folds of gravity, sliding in and out of real space as if it didn't obey the same laws. It was not running away, he said softly. It was lost. The bridge lights flickered as the first Veer scout broke through the field. Its dark hull shimmered with red plasma veins, and the scanners screamed warnings. Mira ordered countermeasures, and the Corvette fired a swarm of decoy drones. The Veer ship fired plasma bolts, burning bright arcs through the void. The first human escort took a hit but kept its course. Mira clenched her teeth. The enemy was trying to box them in. She turned to Eris and asked for a path. He closed his eyes and felt the pull, the rhythm of space, the pulse of something human ahead. He told her to dive left through the debris field that stretched like a broken sea of rocks. No machine could map that maze, but a Starborn could feel it. Mira gave the order, and the Falcon wing plunged into the debris. Chunks of metal and frozen hull fragments drifted by, relics of an old battle long forgotten. The Veer followed, their sensors struggling to track the twisting human ships. Mira guided her crew with steady commands, weaving between wrecks. A plasma bolt grazed their flank and alarms wailed. The bridge shook, sparks flew, but they kept moving. Mira saw the ghost ship flash across the display for an instant. Its shape was human but older, its hull covered in scars and strange energy patterns. The second Veer ship tried to cut them off. Mira shouted for full burn. The human escort behind her turned to face the attacker, knowing what that meant. Its captain's last words came over the comms, steady and without fear. For the fleet. Then the escort rammed the Veer scout head-on, a burst of white fire filling the void. The debris field exploded into chaos. Mira's ship slipped through the explosion and out the other side. Silence returned for a brief second, heavy and cold. Mira closed her eyes for a heartbeat, honoring the sacrifice, then looked back to Eris. He was pale, shaking, but his eyes glowed with something fierce. He had seen where the ghost ship was headed. They came out of the debris into a clear patch of space. The sensors caught it again. A flicker, a shimmer, and then a clear visual. A massive hull drifting through starlight, human-made, older than the oldest registry. The ghost ship's engines flickered with unstable energy, its lights blinking like dying stars, but it was alive. Eris said it was calling, not with sound but through the phase sense itself. He could feel thousands of whispers trapped inside the metal. Mira ordered a scan and got confirmation that there was oxygen, faint power, and maybe even survivors. The signal from before repeated, stronger this time. Lance Corps aboard, incomplete, enemies inside. The words hit like a hammer. If the Veer were already inside the ship, then they were fighting to keep it from falling into human hands. Mira gave the order to close distance. The ship's AI protested, warning of unstable gravity zones. She ignored it. Humanity had lost too much hiding behind warnings. The Falcon wing accelerated, engines roaring. Behind them, the remaining Veer ships regrouped and came after them, determined to erase both the humans and their ghost. As they drew closer, the ghost ship opened a single hangar bay, lights flickering weakly like a beacon. Mira saw it as an invitation and a warning. She prepared the boarding teams. Eris would go with them. He was afraid but ready. He said he could feel something waiting for him inside that ship, something old and human, something that remembered him even though they had never met. Mira touched his shoulder and told him to trust that feeling. The bridge crew watched the hangar grow larger in the viewport, a giant mouth waiting in silence. Far behind them, the Veer fleet burst into real space, weapons armed, engines burning red. The race was ending. Inside the ghost ship, the next chapter was waiting to be written in blood and memory. Boarding the Ghost. The hangar doors of the ghost ship loomed wide and dark, a mouth of metal that seemed ready to swallow anything brave enough to enter. Mira Khan stood at the front of the boarding shuttle, helmet sealed, pulse steady. Around her, the soldiers of Falcon Wing checked weapons, suits, and seals in silence. Eris Hale sat beside her, smaller than the rest, hands trembling but eyes locked forward. He could feel the hum again, deep and ancient, like a heartbeat under the hull. The closer they got, the stronger it became, as if the ship itself recognized him. Mira gave the command, and the shuttle fired its thrusters, gliding through the hangar's magnetic field. The ghost ship accepted them, the bay lights flickering once, weak and cold. When the shuttle touched down, the team moved fast, forming a defensive perimeter. The air was thin but breathable, stale with the taste of dust and old metal. Every step echoed down the long corridors that stretched into darkness. The walls were covered in marks, not from age but from battle. Energy burns, claw gouges, and dried streaks that looked too much like blood. Mira knew what that meant. Someone had fought here recently, and not all of them had been human. She raised a hand, signaling for silence. From deeper in the ship came faint metallic sounds, rhythmic and deliberate. The Veer were still here. Eris followed Mira through the corridors, his senses stretched wide. He could feel the wrongness in the air, the pull of gravity bending in strange directions. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was alive in some strange way, wounded but breathing. As they moved toward the bridge, the corridor split in three. Mira divided her people, sending 2 squads down the side passages while she led the main team toward engineering. Eris hesitated, feeling that the pulse was stronger to the right. Mira nodded and sent him with a small escort that way. His instincts had saved them before, and she trusted him even if he didn't trust himself. Eris moved carefully through the narrow hall, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The hum in his head grew louder until he reached a sealed bulkhead. He placed his hand on the metal, and it felt warm. The pattern of the hum matched his heartbeat. Without understanding why, he whispered that it would open, and the door hissed apart as if it had been waiting for him. Inside was a large chamber, circular and filled with strange machinery. In the center floated a massive core, suspended in magnetic fields that flickered weakly. The metal surface of the core shimmered with light patterns like veins of silver. Eris knew immediately what it was. The stellar lance core, the same weapon mentioned in the ghost transmission. A fragment of power meant to reshape space itself. He stepped closer, drawn by the rhythm. The core pulsed like a living thing, and when he touched the edge of its containment field, he felt voices. Thousands of faint echoes whispering in his mind. They were human voices. Memories of engineers, pilots, soldiers, all trapped in this machine. It was built by humans, abandoned and somehow kept alive by fragments of their thoughts. Eris staggered back, breath quick, realizing the truth. The ghost ship wasn't haunted by the dead. It was carrying them. Before he could speak, the chamber lights turned red. Movement flickered above him. A Veer warrior dropped from the ceiling, tall and armored, blade in hand. Eris froze, but his escort fired, driving the creature back. Another followed, and then 2 more. The Veer had been guarding the core, studying it or trying to claim it. The room filled with plasma fire and the echo of metal. Eris crawled behind a console, his mind spinning. The voices in the core whispered guidance, showing him patterns, predicting attacks. He shouted directions to his team, and somehow they moved just in time, cutting down the last of the attackers. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Mira's voice crackled through the comms. Her team had secured the bridge, but the Veer had left traps and signals behind. She said the ship's systems were damaged but still functional enough to fly. Eris told her about the core, about how it spoke to him. Mira's breath caught for a moment. She ordered him to prepare it for transport. They needed to bring it back to the dock before the Dominion could send reinforcements. Eris hesitated, feeling that moving it would wake something deeper, but he obeyed. He watched as the engineers began to detach the containment links. The core pulsed once more, brighter this time, almost like it was saying goodbye. As they worked, a tremor ran through the hull. Sensors flared with red warnings. Mira's voice came again, tense and sharp. The Veer fleet had arrived early. The traitor who leaked their location had done his work well. The ghost ship was surrounded. Eris looked out through a shattered viewport and saw the crimson light of Veer engines cutting through the dark. Mira shouted that they were lifting off now, and Eris felt the deck shudder as the ancient drives came alive. Flames burned where none should have. The ghost ship roared like something awakening from a long sleep. As they rose from the dead moon's orbit, explosions tore through the outer hull. Mira's mentor, Captain Darren Holt, stayed behind in the engine bay to seal the breaches. His last transmission was calm. He said the ghost ship deserved to fly again. When the final hatch sealed, he was gone. The human fleet broke free, limping and burning but alive. Behind them, the moon cracked apart under the Vire bombardment. Eris watched it fall away, knowing they had escaped by inches. The ghost ship had returned to human hands, but at a terrible cost. The dead moon burned behind them, and ahead waited the endless dark. The race for the Lance Corps had just begun, and the real war was no longer about territory. It was about who would claim the heart of humanity's forgotten power, the origin and the choice. The ghost ship drifted inside the shadow of the asteroid dock like a wounded animal hiding from the hunter. Its hull was scorched and torn, lights flickering weakly as repair drones swarmed over the surface. Inside the docking bay, Mira Khan stood with the engineers and officers, staring at the massive core that now rested in containment. The Lance Corps pulsed with a dim silver glow, casting soft light across the room. It was human technology, but older than anything in service. The engineers whispered that its design matched no known prototype, yet its structure was unmistakably Terran. It carried a resonance that seemed alive, as if it could feel their presence. Eris Hale sat nearby, silent and pale, his eyes fixed on the core. Since boarding the ghost ship, he had felt the whispers grow quieter but clearer. The voices in the metal were not gone. They were waiting. The repair crews worked through the artificial night while the command center buzzed with debate. Reports came from the border patrols that the Vir Dominion had deployed a supercarrier toward their sector. If the enemy found the dock, there would be no time to finish repairs or prepare defenses. Mira knew they were on borrowed hours. Yet in the middle of all the tension, a political transmission arrived from Earth. Governor Lennox, the senior representative of the Terran Union Council, appeared on the holo display. His voice was calm but cold as he demanded control over the ghost ship and the Lance Corps. He called it a threat to peace, claiming that rebuilding ancient weapons would provoke total destruction. Mira listened in silence, anger simmering beneath her calm. Lennox argued that surrender and negotiation could save lives. Mira knew better. The Vir did not negotiate. They erased what they feared. After the meeting ended, Mira walked through the hangar where the Lance Corps rested. Eris followed quietly, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He asked if she believed what the governor said. Mira smiled faintly but without warmth. She said peace bought through surrender was only a longer road to chains. Humanity had already been conquered once, and the scars still ran through their history. The Starborn program itself had been born from that first occupation. It was not a random mutation or miracle. It was a choice humanity made when they were cornered. They engineered the phase sense, an instinct that let them feel what machines could not. It was their answer to Vir domination, a rebellion of the mind. Eris listened, feeling pride and fear mixing inside him. If his power came from desperation, what did that mean for what he would become later that night? The engineers decrypted fragments from the ghost ship's memory banks. The logs revealed that the ship, once named Solace I, had been the last vessel built during the Great Rebellion. It carried the unfinished lance to a hidden dock before the final fall of the human colonies. The ship had never returned because the crew refused to surrender. They sealed themselves inside, merging their neural patterns with the core to keep it alive. That was why Eris had heard their voices. They were not ghosts. They were guardians trapped in code and metal, waiting for a time when humanity could rise again. Mira stood in silence as she read the words of the final captain. If our children find this, tell them we did not die to be forgotten. Finish what we began. As dawn light filtered through the dock's viewport, new alarms screamed across the base. The Vir fleet had arrived sooner than predicted. The supercarrier Vorath had entered the system, its escort wings spreading out like a net of fire. The dock's shields would not hold under a full assault. The tactical officers begged Mira to evacuate. The engineers said they could move the Lance Corps, but only if they had time. Mira looked at the star map and knew there was no safe route. The asteroid belt around them was unstable, gravity fields twisting from mining detonations long ago. To run meant to die. To hide meant to be cornered. To fight meant to risk everything. She turned to her crew and made the choice. They would move the entire dock into the belt's shadow, using the debris as a shield. The enemy would have to come close to find them. And when they did, the humans would strike. Eris felt the pull again, stronger than ever, as if the Lance Corps itself approved of Mira's decision. He went to the observation deck and watched the stars shift as the dock engines pushed them deeper into the asteroid field. The Vire ships appeared at the edge of the scanners, their red lights spreading like blood across the black. Aris whispered that they would come soon. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder and told him to remember why humans fought. Not for revenge, not for conquest, but for the right to exist without permission. Her words were steady but heavy with truth. As the dock disappeared into the asteroid shadows, the enemy began to close in. The stage was set. Humanity's secret weapon was half awake, its guardians reborn in flesh and mind. And Mira Khan, the woman who refused to surrender, prepared to face an empire with nothing but courage, a wounded ship, and a boy who could hear the heartbeat of the stars. Break the net. The asteroid belt stretched like a jagged wall of stone and ice, a natural labyrinth of deadly angles and gravity eddies. The dock carrying the ghost ship and the Lance Corps moved slowly through it, every thruster burn measured, every maneuver calculated. Mira Khan stood on the bridge, jaw tight, eyes scanning the sensor feeds that showed the red shapes of the Vir supercarrier and its escort wings advancing with surgical precision. Behind them, the small fleet had formed a perimeter, but it was fragile. One wrong move and the trap would close. Aris Hale sat nearby, his hands gripping the edges of the sensor chair, his phase sense thrumming like a drumbeat in his head. He could feel the gravity shifts of the asteroids, the pull of the dock and the intentions of the enemy fleet, almost as if they were alive and trying to crush him under invisible fingers. The first wave of Vir fighters arrived silently, darting between asteroids with a speed no human machine could match. Mira ordered the corvettes to split formation, to lure the fighters into ambush points among the belt. They moved with precision, guided by Aris as he projected the pull of the gravity flows into vectors that the pilots could follow. One fighter went down in a flash of plasma, its hull vaporized against a boulder that seemed to leap from nowhere. Another veered off course and collided with debris. The humans had trained for this, but the Vir adapted quickly, deploying new patterns of attack that tested every instinct in the Falcon wing. Mira's mind raced as she calculated each counter. They had to thread the dock through the gaps that opened for only seconds, like threading a needle in the dark while being shot at. As the dock moved deeper into the belt, alarms blared. Gravity nets the Vire had deployed were beginning to close around them, invisible strands bending space and pulling ships off course. The engineers reported that if they were caught, the dock would crumble. Mira gave orders to fire disruptors, sending pulses of energy that severed some strands but left others intact. The humans were caught between the weight of the dock and the pull of the net. The phase sense hummed in Aris's head as he guided every corvette through the openings. Sweat ran down his face as he projected the invisible lanes, feeling every shift and twist in the warped space. Then the Vir brought in the supercarrier closer, a massive hulk that blocked sunlight and radiated heat like a dying star. Its weapons charged, targeting the dock with deadly precision. Mira's heart clenched. They could not outrun it. She ordered the corvettes to lay down a continuous barrage, a curtain of plasma meant to keep the escort wings busy, while the dock slipped through the net. Explosions filled the sensors as fighter after fighter was destroyed or blown off course. The dock shuddered as nearby blasts shook its hull. Aris felt the pulse of fear and hope in the fleet, and he realized the phase sense grew stronger when he carried it, not alone but with every life depending on him. He directed the dock through the final opening, a space so narrow that even the corvettes scraped against the edges. A moment of silence followed as the entire fleet cleared the trap, a collective breath held in the void. Then a broadcast shattered the fragile calm. Governor Lennox, the same man who had argued for surrender, appeared on the comm channels. His voice was calm, almost hypnotic, urging civilians to evacuate and accept Vir rule. He claimed he could spare lives if the humans abandoned the dock and the Lance Corps. His words were meant to fracture the morale of the crew, but instead they ignited a fire in Mira's heart. She knew he had made a backdoor deal with the Vir, and the timing of the fleet's arrival made it clear. The dockyard families and the civilians were at risk, yet she refused to abandon them. Every officer, every engineer, and every Starborn aboard followed her lead. They would not yield. The first boarding wave of Vir soldiers struck just as the dock passed through the final gap of the net. The humans opened fire, plasma bolts arcing through the corridors as the Starborn cadets, including Aris, moved with instinctive precision. He felt the hum of the Lance Corps guiding him, showing him paths to intercept attackers before they could reach the vital systems. The battle was brutal. Every step forward fought with fire and blood. Mira moved through the chaos, directing her people with sharp commands, shielding engineers as they worked to reinforce the dock's hull. The Vir were disciplined, but the humans had something they could never understand: ingenuity and the will to survive. Meanwhile, the traitor governor's actions became clear. He had opened a hidden docking gate, allowing a squadron of Vir fighters to bypass the belt entirely and strike directly at the civilian sectors. Mira's communicator buzzed with urgent calls. The families were trapped, the evacuation routes cut off. She faced a choice that would define the lives of hundreds. She split the fleet. One contingent, led by a trusted officer, would move to rescue the dockyard and the civilians. The other, including herself and Eris, would stay to secure the Lance Corps and finish its preparations. Every heart aboard thumped with tension, fear, and determination. The Starborn pulse in Eris's mind became a chorus of wills, guiding the ships, guiding the crew, making them more than machines. The dock shook as the Vir fighters closed in. Explosions tore through peripheral hulls, and emergency lights flickered over faces streaked with sweat and grime. Mira moved with calculated fury, coordinating attack and defense, every decision a razor's edge between life and death. Eris called out gravity shifts and projected vectors that allowed corvettes to weave through fire and debris. The engineers worked in tandem, stabilizing the Lance Corps, its faint pulse now resonating through the dock like a heartbeat of hope. Mira realized that this was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a test of humanity's ability to fight as one, to carry fear and hope as fuel rather than burden. The dock finally cleared the net and entered the relative safety of the belt's inner shadow. Mira allowed herself a brief glance at the chaos left behind. Ships were damaged, lives had been lost, but the core was intact. Eris, pale but resolute, looked out at the star-streaked void and whispered that he could feel the next step, a warning that the enemy was not done. Mira knew he was right. The Vir would regroup, the traitor would act again, and the next challenge would be greater than this one. Yet for the moment they had broken the net. They had survived, and humanity's secret weapon had not fallen into enemy hands. The dock, battered and wounded, moved through the darkness carrying hope, defiance, and the pulse of a new human dawn heartbeat of the Lance. The ancient ring station loomed in orbit around a dying brown dwarf named Hecate, its metal surface scarred from centuries of neglect and cosmic storms. Eris Hale stared through the viewport of the shuttle, his palms pressed against the cold glass as he felt the hum of the Lance Corps thrumming in his chest like a living thing. The Starborn instinct told him this place was the cradle for the Corps, its resonance pulsing with memories of humans long gone, whispering instructions and warnings he could barely comprehend. Mirakan was beside him, strapped into her own seat, her eyes sharp as the station grew larger on the sensor feed. Every ship in the small fleet held position, their engines low to avoid detection. The Vir had spread their net across the sector, waiting to crush any who dared approach. The shuttle cut through the void, silently guided by Eris as he fed the subtle gravity currents and microflows into the nav system. His phase sense reached beyond his body into the ship, into the pulse of every human heart aboard the dock, and every lingering echo in the Lance Corps. They entered the station through a collapsed docking bay, careful to avoid the unstable corridors that threatened to collapse into the star's gravity well. Inside, the metal corridors smelled of age and ozone. The lights flickered and cast long shadows across the walls. Engineers moved cautiously, repairing systems, while Eris followed the pull of the core, guiding them toward the chamber at the heart of the station. Mira's team cleared the hallways of automated defense drones left behind by the original builders. Every step was tense because the Vir were hunting them, and their reinforcements could arrive at any moment. The station itself seemed to respond to the presence of the Starborn, a low vibration, traveling through the floor, humming in time with Eris's heartbeat. It told him that the Corps wanted to awaken. It had waited for someone who could hear it and understand the rhythm. Mira kept her gaze on the tactical screens as she directed the boarding teams and the engineers, moving the Corps into the central chamber. The walls of the station seemed to breathe with energy as they approached. Eris laid his hands upon the Lance Corps. It was cool yet vibrant, a living memory of human ingenuity and determination. The voices came again, soft at first, then louder. A chorus of engineers, soldiers, and explorers merged into one, telling him how to activate the resonance, how to sync the heart of the Lance to the fleet. Mira watched as his eyes closed and his body stiffened, the faint glow of the Corps spreading through his suit and into the surrounding chamber. His mind became the bridge between the humans, still alive, and the echoes of the Starborn who had built this weapon to defend humanity when all hope had been lost. Meanwhile, Mira's own battle raged aboard the Vir supercarrier where she had been taken for interrogation. She was chained in the command hall surrounded by the tall silver-armored Vir officers who studied every human instinct with cold calculation. Mira understood their arrogance and began to use it against them. She spoke calmly and steadily about human history, about how they refused to yield under impossible odds, about how every Starborn carried not just talent, but the will of an entire species. She dissected the pride of the Vir commander, showing him that humans did not fight like machines, that their tactics were not predictable, that their unity was a force beyond comprehension. Every question he asked she answered with lessons that seeded doubt and anger in his mind. She became both teacher and shield, leaving him unnerved while she waited for her opportunity to escape. Back in the station, Eris focused all his senses on the Lance Corps, feeling the resonance link with the dock and the smaller ships in orbit. He instructed engineers and pilots to harmonize their actions. Every thrust, every weld, every adjustment became part of a growing human chorus. The phase sense allowed him to feel fear, hope, and determination as one combined pulse, and he used it to stabilize the core's awakening. The energy in the chamber rose and arced with silver light, the ancient metal singing in response. The Starborn program's intention became clear to him. It was never a weapon to destroy, but to amplify the will of humanity to protect what they loved. He directed the final sequences, and the core hummed at full power. Every ship in the small fleet shuddered as energy spread through their shields and engines. The Vir at the edge of the system detected the spike and opened a stargate over Earth. Preparing to strike, Eris hesitated for a fraction of a second, feeling the weight of every human life depending on him. Mira's voice echoed through his communicator, reminding him that the heart of the Lance was not just in its energy, but in the unity of those who fought to protect it. He drew a deep breath, felt the heartbeat of the fleet in the station and the echoes of the Starborn meld into one. Then he pointed the Lance Corps at the approaching stargate, not to kill but to disrupt the geometry, to close the path to the Vir fleet, to protect Earth. The pulse surged outward, a wave of silver light, bending space and resonance around the gate, causing it to fold and collapse in on itself. Outside the station, the stargate flickered and vanished, leaving the Vir supercarrier stranded far from its target. The energy dissipated slowly, leaving the chamber quiet and glowing faintly. Mira's communicator buzzed with a weak signal. She was free and guiding scattered human ships to regroup and rescue the dock from remaining enemy forces. Eris felt exhaustion settle through him, but also relief, pride, and a strange joy. The Lance had awakened fully, and humanity had proven that their instinct, unity, and courage could alter the course of even the most impossible threats. The echoes of the Starborn had found a new voice in him, and the pulse of hope spread across every human heart in the fleet, signaling that a new chapter of defiance had begun, and the enemy had been reminded that humans no longer bent to tyranny. Last stand and new dawn. The silence of space after the Lance Corps fired was almost deafening. The stargate over Earth had collapsed, leaving the Vir fleet stranded and disoriented. Mira Khan piloted her ship alongside scattered human vessels, her hands steady on the controls despite the fatigue and tension that weighed on her like gravity. The rescue teams moved quickly through the asteroid belt, cutting through debris to reach the dock and the civilians. Alarms still rang faintly from damaged hulls, but every crew member worked with precision, knowing that every second mattered. Eris Hale sat at the sensor station aboard the ghost ship, feeling the pulse of the Lance Corps still thrumming beneath his feet. The voices of the Starborn had quieted, but their guidance lingered in him, a silent encouragement that this moment would define humanity's next chapter. The Vir, stranded without the gate, attempted to regroup. Their commanders barked orders, their silver armor glinting in the distant light of Hecate, but they had underestimated humans before, and had done so again. Without the Stargate to retreat or advance, they were trapped in a section of space controlled by the Starborn and the human fleet. Mira coordinated a counterstrike, sending corvettes to flank the Vir fighters while heavy drones deployed to disable the enemy's engines. The first wave was met with precision fire from the dock's defensive turrets, which Mira had reinforced using engineers freed from the evacuation efforts. The dock shields held despite the damage from the prior engagements, a testament to the skill and determination of the crew and the Starborn cadets guiding them. Eris's phase sense guided every movement of the fleet. He could feel the intentions of the Veer pilots, the trembling of engines as they tried to maneuver and the fears of his own crew. His guidance allowed the corvettes to weave through the void, striking at weak points in the enemy formation. Every pulse he felt was translated into motion, strategy, and timing. Mira watched him, impressed and awed, realizing that the young Starborn had grown into a leader in this moment. Not through training or rank, but through instinct, courage, and the bond he carried with every life aboard the dock and the fleet. Meanwhile, Mira herself led a boarding strike against the stranded Veer supercarrier. With precise coordination, her squad infiltrated the vessel through maintenance hatches, moving silently to disable weapon systems and override navigation controls. She confronted the Veer commander directly, using the lessons of patience and intimidation she had mastered during her own interrogation. She demonstrated humanity's resilience, forcing the commander to yield his pride and recognize that humans would no longer be intimidated. The boarding was swift, calculated, and complete. When the command systems fell into human hands, the remaining Veer fighters hesitated, unsure of how to continue the assault without guidance or coordination. Back aboard the ghost ship, Eris watched the pulse of the Lance Corps slowly fade to a steady hum. The Starborn voices that had guided him were still present but quiet, like an old memory finally at peace. The dock's engines powered fully as the remaining civilian ships joined the formation. The last of the damaged corvettes were repaired enough to follow the fleet safely into orbit. Mira contacted the governor who had betrayed them. His broadcast signal was hijacked by the human fleet, exposing his treachery to the public. The citizens watched as the man who had promised peace through surrender was revealed to have endangered countless lives. Justice was swift but measured, and the message was clear. Humanity would no longer cower or compromise under threats. The Veer commander, defeated but alive, signaled a retreat. His fleet scattered into the void, crippled and humiliated by what humans had accomplished. Mira and Eris watched the enemy disappear, a mix of relief and triumph settling over the fleet. The dock floated among the asteroids, battered yet intact, carrying civilians, engineers, and Starborn alike. There was a quiet celebration aboard the ghost ship, laughter mixed with tears as families reunited and soldiers saluted the Starborn cadets. Eris felt the resonance of the Lance Corps within him one last time, a reminder that the pulse of humanity was not in weapons but in courage, unity, and the will to protect what they loved in the aftermath. Funerals were held for those lost, both on the dock and among the fleet. The Starborn cadets, including Eris, stood in silent tribute, feeling the weight of those sacrifices and the responsibility that came with surviving. Mira looked out over the recovering fleet and the stars beyond, thinking of all that had been reclaimed and all that remained to be rebuilt. Humanity had survived an empire's wrath, reclaimed a lost power, and proven that their instincts, courage, and unity were a force no machine or tyrant could fully predict or destroy. The ghost ship, once unknown, now became a symbol of hope and defiance, its pulse echoing in the hearts of every human alive. As the dock and the fleet moved toward the outer rim, Eris felt the phase sense begin to settle. The whispers of the Starborn faded into quiet memory, their purpose fulfilled. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured and accomplished. Humanity stood together, Starborn and ungifted alike, no longer at the mercy of fear or tyranny. The galaxy was wide and dangerous, but for the first time in generations, humans could choose the terms of their own survival. The stars stretched before them full of possibility, and the new dawn had arrived, humanity reclaimed. The quiet of space after the battle was almost unbearable. A fragile calm stretched across the void as if the universe itself held its breath. The dock floated among shattered asteroids and drifting debris, its hull scarred but unbroken. Mira Khan stood on the observation deck, eyes scanning the horizon, watching the scattered remnants of the Veer fleet retreat into the darkness. Eris Hale was beside her, pale but steady, feeling the faint pulse of the Lance Corps that had guided them to victory. It had settled now, a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat in the silence, a reminder that the power they carried was not destruction, but protection. Humanity had survived the impossible and emerged alive and united. The fleet moved cautiously, escorting the dock and civilians to a safer orbit around the brown dwarf Hecate. The engineers worked tirelessly repairing hull breaches and stabilizing engines. Eris felt every movement through his phase sense, every adjustment and every hesitation, feeding into his awareness. He could feel the fear of the civilians, the exhaustion of the engineers, and the hope of the fleet as one collective pulse. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and reminded him why the Starborn were not weapons but the conscience of humanity, guides who could turn instinct into strategy and fear into courage. Mira watched him silently, knowing that he had grown beyond a boy into the pulse of a people. On the ghost ship, the Lance Corps rested in its containment field, quiet but alive, its energy no longer a threat but a bond between all those who had fought for survival. Mira convened the surviving officers and engineers in the central chamber. She spoke not of victory or glory but of responsibility. The battle was over, but the work of rebuilding and protecting humanity was just beginning. The traitor governor had been exposed and faced justice before the citizens and the fleet. His lies could no longer threaten the unity that had carried them through the fight. Mira felt a strange satisfaction not in vengeance but in truth prevailing, and the people witnessing it for themselves. The Starborn cadets, including Eris, moved through the dock helping repair systems and tending to the wounded. The hum of their collective phase sense was like music in the void. It carried with it lessons of courage, unity, and hope. Mira saw the faces of the civilians who had survived, and the soldiers who had returned from the edge of death and felt the weight of what had been accomplished. Humanity had faced annihilation, betrayal, and the fury of an empire, and yet they endured. The ghosts of the past had guided them, and now the living were the keepers of the future. Outside the dock, the stars stretched endlessly, each one a possibility. The Veer had retreated for now, but the lesson had been written in their defeat. Humans no longer crouched in fear or waited for mercy from tyrants. They shaped their own destiny and claimed their right to exist on their own terms. Mira placed a hand on Eris's shoulder, silent acknowledgement passing between them that the future belonged to those who dared to protect it. The Lance Corps' faint glow pulsed once more as if agreeing and then settled. A quiet sentinel in the void waiting for the next chapter that humanity would write. As repairs continued and the fleet regained strength, the dock prepared to leave Hecate orbit for the outer colonies. The survivors carried with them the memory of those lost and the knowledge that unity and courage were their greatest weapons. Eris stood at the observation deck again, looking at the stars and feeling the pulse of life in every human heart that had survived. Mira stood beside him, calm and resolute. The battle had ended, but the story of humanity had only begun. Together, Starborn and ungifted alike, they would forge their place among the stars and ensure that no empire could ever claim their freedom again. The ghost ship no longer drifted as a relic of the past. It sailed as a symbol of hope and determination. The galaxy was wide and dangerous, but humanity had learned to move through it with courage and instinct. Mira looked forward to the new dawn, feeling the weight of leadership and the thrill of survival. Eris felt the legacy of the Starborn settle within him, a bond with every human life that survived, and every future they would protect. The stars were alive with promise, and humanity had finally claimed its right to reach for them. The end.